All right, welcome. So I hope everybody has been enjoying the symposium so far. And for those of you guys that haven't been there, welcome. It's been a great set of talks and panels. I'm John Kupfer from the Department of Geography at the University of South Carolina. I'm also a member of the symposium organizing committee, and I'll be the moderator for this session. Now in this, what we'll do is we're gonna shift our focus just a little bit to a topic that's of interest to a lot of you, which is managing water at the local level. And specifically what we've done is we've asked our four presenters in this session who bring a lot of experience in this topic and also represent a diverse range of organizations and backgrounds, as you'll hear, to address this question. What is it that you think are the most important water resource challenges facing the park and the surrounding communities? A couple other logistical things, then I'll introduce the speakers. So if you haven't been with us earlier today, we'll reserve questions until the end, so we won't address them to each of the individual speakers until we get through all four folks. You can post questions. As you'll see, there's a session Q&A box that's located on the details page just to the right of the main Zoom window. Go ahead and enter your questions there, and then I'll be moderating these when we get done. If you need technical assistance, there's also a chat box there, and either myself or our Delaney representative will be able to help you with those types of things. Basically what I'd like to do then is just give you a quick overview of the four speakers, and then I'll turn it over to our first of those. So the first speaker is going to be Sunitha Williams, who is the stormwater manager for Richland County. She's worked in local government since 2002 and has experience in stormwater management, sustainability, public outreach, and public policy. She also serves on the board of directors for the South Carolina chapter of the American Public Works Association and as the board representative on the executive committee of the Southeast Stormwater Association. She'll be followed by Alex Butler, who's manager of the water quantity permitting section and underground injection control program at South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. And Alex has spent 18 years working for the state, both with DHEC and also with South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. Next up will be Guillermo Espinoza, who is a senior planner for the Central Midlands Council of Governments. Guillermo utilizes his background in environmental science, geography, spatial analysis, and cartography to support the Central Midland COG's various planning activities and programs. And he's experienced in coordinating and collaborating with various government and private organizations to develop planning strategies related to water quality remediation, natural hazard mitigation, and community development. And then we'll wrap it up with Garrett Jobsis as the Associate Director of South Carolina Conservation. He leads American Rivers program for the voluntary removal of outdated dams that clog the state's waterways. Previously, he served as a senior director in American Rivers Conservation Programs Department, guiding their advocacy for healthy rivers in Southern Appalachia and the Carolinas. He also previously worked for South Carolina DNR as a fisheries biologist and environmental manager, where his responsibilities included leading the wildlife and freshwater fisheries divisions, environmental program office. So with that said, this time I'm going to turn it over to Sunitha to start, and go ahead and unmute yourself and take it away.
All right, thank you so much. Oh. All right, awesome. So, hi everyone. Happy to be here, happy to talk to everyone who's here, and I hope you've enjoyed the symposium so far. I'm hoping that I can add some more knowledge and information that'll be beneficial to everyone who's here this afternoon. And I'm a little bit more nervous on Zoom versus when I'm in front of like an audience of a bunch of people. So if I start talking fast, I apologize for that. Just don't have that same interaction. But I'm Sunitha Williams. I'm the Stormwater General Manager with the Richland County Department of Public Works. I've been here for about 6 years this past December, and wow, it has been an interesting ride from the time that I started here to being now and learning so much about the different challenges and water resources we have, problems we have here in Richland County. But first, I'll start by just letting people know exactly what stormwater is and who we are, because that's, to me, one of the challenges I face is that there's this public perception of what we do in stormwater versus the reality of what we actually do in stormwater. And that's one of the biggest challenges that I've faced since being here, is trying to meet public perception, but also remain to the task and what we're supposed to do here in stormwater. We are a part of the Department of Public Works. In the graphic on your screen, you can see that the Public Works Department has several other divisions. We all work together as a team to manage the county's roads and drainage infrastructure, solid waste. We do engineering, and we also work with beautifying the county through the support services division as well. I put tie-ins to other departments that work closely with us, such as community development and planning. I'll touch on that later, and also the transportation penny, because they're not part of public works, but we coincide so much with a lot of the things that we do, that they're almost like a de facto family member of public works. What we mostly focus on in the stormwater management division is overseeing the implementation of the county's NPDES MS4 permit. And that is our core function. And a lot of times we get asked to do things that are kind of outside those core functions, which can prove challenging for us, or it's a function that falls somewhere else within the department or another division. We don't do any construction plan review or inspections, but we do have a capital improvement program that tries to handle flood control projects and address major flooding issues and some water quality projects as well. And in stormwater, we assist with disaster recovery efforts within the Department of Public Works. So exactly what are we here to do? What do we do over there in stormwater? We get asked that question a lot. Our permit is an individual permit. It's not a general permit like you see around the rest of the state. The county's NPDES permit is written specifically for us. And so that's what it means when it's an individual permit. And so a lot of times people will hear that we have a stormwater program and a stormwater permit, and they think we do everything related to water quality. And that's not exactly how it works out. With the stormwater program, there are very specific federal regulatory things that we have to make sure that we do. And even though it is a water quality permit, the stormwater permit is specifically for managing the county's drainage system. So making sure that nothing goes into that system that's not stormwater, and nothing comes out of it that's not stormwater, and making sure county operations don't contribute to pollution going into the system. That's kind of like the basic Cliff Notes version. So we are not across the board everything water quality. We're very focused on trying to keep our system functioning and clean, whether it's inspecting our drainage infrastructure, making sure that our roadways are not contributing to pollution, or our work associated with our roadways aren't contributing to pollution, making sure any flood projects also consider water quality. We look at all of the county facilities to ensure that we're not doing anything on site that's causing water quality issues. None of our operations are causing, illegal dumping or anything like that. That we are properly handling the application of pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers. That we have a program in place where if we do find out someone's illegally discharging or dumping into our system, that we go out and we can stop that illegal discharge. We can go after those people to make them clean it up. And we also have to have an education and outreach program. So we have a huge education and outreach program that I could do a whole presentation on each one of these individual sections. What we don't do in stormwater is we don't handle plan review for new development or redevelopment. That is currently handled in the community development and planning site. And we also don't do any of the construction site inspections. That's a common misperception. If there's a construction activity happening or a new development coming in, they call us in stormwater, but the way it's set up, that's not over here. And so that's why we work closely with community development and planning to handle that. We do have a water quality monitoring program. That is fairly extensive. We have impaired water sampling, where we kind of go out if there's an impaired watershed that DHEC has deemed this watershed is impaired for E. coli or pH or whatever. We go out and we have samples set up. We mostly do grab samples where we take things from the creek and we try to get those background conditions to see if we're noticing those same problems routinely. And then we use that to guide our programs of any kind of new projects we need to put in or any kind of education outreach we may need to do. We also have TMDL monitoring. So if that impaired watershed is given a total maximum daily load, a TMDL from DHEC, then we go out and do end of the pipe sampling, outfall sampling, because what we want to know when it comes to TMDLs is if it's the county's infrastructure, stuff coming out of our system that's creating that problem. And so that's why we do end of pipe sampling. We also do macroinvertebrate sampling where we look at the bugs in the creek because they can indicate problems, and also some sediment and some DO, dissolved oxygen sampling using a sonde. What we've started doing within the past 2 years is using that data to guide some of our watershed plans. So previously, the county, we had a huge program. We took a bunch of data, we would monitor, but it only kind of skimmed the surface. We put it in a database and we just held on to it. Well, now we're taking that data and we're using it to come up with plans for these watersheds that are impaired or may have TMDLs. So on your screen is a snapshot of Tom's Creek watershed. It's a watershed that goes directly into Congaree National Park. You can see the little water drops are where the county, our stormwater division, is taking in-stream sampling. We have 3 in-stream sampling locations within Tom's Creek. And so because this doesn't have a TMDL, but it's impaired for E. coli and pH in certain areas, we're doing this in-stream sampling to kind of see what are the background conditions. Are we also seeing high levels? Is it changing based off of rainfall or things like that? And so about 2 years ago, we brought on a watershed program coordinator to specifically work with us as we look through the monitoring data and what's happening out there. So what are some of the challenges specifically related to the park? How do we achieve balance with those challenges when our program is so specific on what we have to do? Well, a lot of the concerns that are brought to us in stormwater are, one is general water quality in the area. People are always asking us, hey, what's your sampling saying? You know, what does it look like out there? Have you sampled over here? Well, we don't sample everywhere. I've shown you like on the map kind of where we look specifically based off of where DHEX pulls samples and major points where the streams come together. And that's where we sample. But what we've gotten so far, it indicates overall healthy conditions. We look at our data once a quarter. We sit down, we review it, we go over it, we look if there's anything wonky that we might need to kind of hone in on. And in that area, we have not seen anything that's been really out of balance that we need to kind of dig in on. But there's other areas in the county where we have seen things. Ditches. Ditch maintenance is a big thing that's brought up to us, especially in the lower Richland area. The county does not maintain all the ditches. We outsource maintenance of some of the larger drainage canals that were out there. And if we have an easement, our responsibility for maintenance, or we've done a project, then we do things, but that is one of the things related to flood control. People are worried about overgrown ditches getting clogged related to flooding. And so we try to have a balance of that with outsourcing what we can and working with roads and drainage to go out and clean the ditches that they have the responsibility and can go out and clean. Pond maintenance is another huge one. There's this common misperception that the county owns and maintains and tells everybody what they need to do with their ponds. When we don't, our permit only says we need to look at stormwater retention or detention ponds. And so that's what we focus on in stormwater, but we have learned proper maintenance of the farm ponds and other kind of wet ponds so we can go out and work with property owners about proper maintenance, give recommendations so that their ponds can function. And we did recently approve a private pond outfall maintenance policy because our system does discharge into some of these ponds, not only in Lower Richland, but across the county. And so we want to have some kind of partnership with the private pond owner on ways to keep that pond functioning. And then development in the area is a huge concern. Increased development obviously leads to increased stress on the watershed. We're currently in the process of working with community development and planning to update the county's land development manual, where we will have better water quality standards within that so that you have to infiltrate or filter like that 95th percentile storm. That'll be a huge deal where it can also reduce the volume going downstream, where you have to show anti-degradation calculations that if you're in an impaired watershed, you're not making things worse. And we're hoping that can all be approved with the update with the planning ordinance this spring and summer. And so those are some of the ways that we're trying to address the concerns that are brought to us in stormwater related to Lower Richland and the watersheds that are going into the Congaree Swamp. So spoke really fast, but in conclusion, the Stormwater Management Division, we are part of the team in the County Department of Public Works. Our main focus is implementing the county's MS4 permit, but because we know that there are multiple challenges throughout the county and we get asked to do a lot of things, that we always try to figure out ways that we can meet those public expectations and what programs can we come up with. Do we need to switch a monitoring location to kind of address a potential water quality concern in another area of the county. If there's flooding in the area, if we need to address flooding, what can we also do to address water quality? Let's not just look at the flooding, but what kind of parameters or pollutants that may be out there. So we're always trying to figure out ways to not only meet the regulatory requirements we have, but also meet the expectations of the public for us to maintain and take care of the county's water resources. And so that's where I'll stop.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So next up, Alex Butler.
Good afternoon, everybody. Try to get this screen shared here. Hopefully y'all can see that.
Yep, looks good.
So again, my name's Alex Butler, and I manage the water quantity permitting section for the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. And so what we do in our group is we're really the regulation part of the informed water policy for the state of South Carolina. This is a graphic that I stole from Clemson Extension, actually. And in it, they were trying to show, that the DNR has the planning aspect of water policy. DHEC has the regulation part, and Clemson, being Clemson, stole the entire science part of that activity. But I really like the graphic because it did show that, it's a multi-agency effort to have informed water policy. But I did think it was missing a piece. And so what I did is I just took that graphic and I added a small bit of the number of other partners that we work with when we're trying to come up with how to manage water statewide. And that includes federal and local partners. Some of these have spoken today. Some of them I think are getting ready to speak. But it's a large group of people and a lot of varied interests dealing with water policy statewide. So at DHEC, we have two main water quantity programs. The first is the groundwater use and reporting program. It's actually been in place since the 1970s. South Carolina was actually pretty progressive in getting that put in place way back in the 70s. And that was due large part to concern of saltwater intrusion along the coast, particularly along the Grand Strand and Hilton Head areas. But what this program does is that we issue permits in designated capacity use areas of the coastal plain for people or facilities that use over 3 million gallons in any month. And that's kind of a large number to try to wrap your head around, but that's about an inch of water per week on 28 acres for an irrigator, or about what the average of 1,000 people would use over a month. Outside of capacity use areas, users over that 3 million gallon a month threshold still have to register their wells with us and report their water use to us. We also have the surface water withdrawal permitting and reporting program. And these are two separate laws. They both have the 3 million gallon threshold. And with the surface water side, we still have all registered and permitted surface water withdrawals report their use to us. But these programs, again, since they have different implementing laws, they don't necessarily talk to each other fantastically well. And that's probably one of the main challenges in managing water in South Carolina right now. Get back to the groundwater side a little bit. We are currently in the process of proposing a new capacity use area, which would include Richland County and Congaree National Park. It's the 6-county area of Richland, Sumter, Clarendon, Kershaw, Lee, and Chesterfield. And that really would bring the rest of the coastal plain of South Carolina into being capacity use areas. We have existing capacity use areas, the most recent being the western capacity use area, kind of on the other side of the Congaree Santee system that just came on in 2018, 2019. For those that want to learn more about this, we do have a public information meeting coming up January 12th at 6 p.m. And more information on that can be found on the DHEC website. If you just kind of Google DHEC Santee Lynches, you'll get to it. Once we designate a capacity use area, we then go kind of to the local planning. As a capacity use area, we're required to develop a local groundwater management plan. And this is where the department would get together a group of stakeholders, and we try to balance representation of those stakeholders to come up with a plan for the area on how to manage the groundwater resource. So again, we want to have, different use types. So we have irrigators, water suppliers, conservation, golf courses, aquaculture. We try to make sure that all interest groups are represented while keeping the group to a workable number. And we also try to make sure that it has good geographic representation. So we don't want all of our representatives to come from one county or one area. We like to spread it out across the entire area. We're also looking for different expertise and perspectives, especially people who have a background in water resources, and people that can connect to broader stakeholder groups. So if any of y'all are watching this and work in the Richland County or in the rest of the Santee Lynches area, I encourage you to get involved. And this is a real opportunity for you to help decide how groundwater is managed and will be managed in the Santee Lynches area if it's approved by the board. And that's a whole long different presentation about how to get that approved by the board. And if you're interested in that, I encourage you to sit in on that meeting on the 12th. One real challenge with managing groundwater is this groundwater. We have to think of it like a groundwater balance, kind of like a checking account. We have our deposits of recharge, surface water inflow, and water injection in some cases. And then we have a change in storage. So this is the actual amount of water stored in the system. And that has to equal our natural withdrawals, which you can think of as surface water discharge, so base flows to streams, springs, even direct evapotranspiration from the system, plus our well withdrawals. So these are water supply, industrial, irrigation systems. So as we increase these well withdrawals out of the system, we have to balance this out across the equation. So we either have to increasing groundwater deposits isn't really that much of an option. You can do some things to help that, but you're really either going to change storage, which we can only do for so long, because if you think of it as your savings account balance, it'll last you for a while, but at some point it's going to run out. Or we have to reduce our natural withdrawals, and that's really what we're concerned with is are we reducing those natural flows that need to happen to surface water or springs. We also have other issues that come up. Farther towards the coast, we're concerned with land subsidence. So as you reduce that storage in the aquifer, you can actually compact the sediments down and cause land subsidence. You may have heard of that out west where they've had tens of feet of land subsidence in areas. We don't see things like that here, but we do see what appears to be millimeters per year of compaction, which doesn't sound like a lot until you're sitting in Charleston and realize that Charleston is not that high above sea level, and if we're compacting that down millimeters per year, we could be causing some serious problems. Additionally, we also have to worry about saltwater intrusion along the coast. So we do have an area on Hilton Head where saltwater, we've reversed the flow gradients of the system, and now saltwater has moved into what was once a freshwater aquifer and caused some wells to be lost to that. That's an interstate issue, actually, because it's partly due to pumping on Hilton Head, but it's also partly due to a large cone of depression centered around Savannah. One of the main issues with trying to deal with this groundwater balance concept is we don't always know, our deposits are not consistent. So on the right side, there's two different maps of South Carolina, and these are from a recharge model. The top one shows a good recharge year, and the bottom one shows a not so good recharge year. And the information on the left is taken from the CISA group at USC, and it's kind of showing a drought status over the different climate divisions, a few different climate divisions, going back into 1900 or so. And you can see that we have periods that are really wet, represented by the blue areas, and periods that are pretty dry, represented by the brown areas. And we can get in those extended periods of dry, and that means we're not getting the same recharge into the system that maybe we would during a wet period. So that becomes a challenge in managing the groundwater system, because we are trying to maintain that balance. And if our inputs are changing, we have to be aware of that what we see on any given day is maybe not representative of the period of record. Switch gears a little bit. Again, we also have the surface water program. And like I said, it's a separate law. Where on the groundwater side, all users are treated equally. That's not the case on the surface water side. On the surface water side, the law basically sets up three different categories of users. We have those people that would get permits. So that's new water suppliers or new industrial users, golf courses, things like that, that are new, that weren't existing prior to the law going into effect. Those require what we call a safe yield evaluation, which is a horrible term for what really should be called legally available water, which is defined in the regulation as 20% of the mean annual daily flow. We do a reasonable use evaluation. So, is the amount of water they're asking for a reasonable amount? There's an evaluation for minimum in-stream flows. They have to have a drought contingency plan. There's public notice. There's a permit with an expiration date, usually 20 to 40 years, and there's an application fee and an annual fee. The law also, for existing users, created what we have are grandfathered permits, and these are permits. They have an expiration date, but there was no of this other evaluation that took place. So there's no reasonable use evaluation. The grandfathered permits, for the most part, were set at the amount of water that the intake could handle. And that's how the law set it up. So if they had an existing intake, it really didn't matter how much water they needed for their purpose or they were currently using. Their initial grandfathered permit was issued for what the intake could handle. They do have to have a contingency plan, but only for water conservation measures. And these permits range from 30 to 50 years in length. We also have registrations, and registrations are a category that were created for agricultural users. So it's not a permit, it's just a registration. So basically all that happens with a registration is it's sent to the department. It's determined whether their request is within what's the calculated safe yield at that point, the adjusted safe yield at that point. And as long as the number they're requesting is under that that safe yield, they are deemed registered. So it's not really a departmental decision. It's just deemed registered if it exists, if the request is below the safe yield amount. So that creates a challenge having different categories of users trying to utilize the same resource. Just a little graphic to kind of help you wrap your head around safe yield. Safe yield is not a number that applies to the entire river. There's no safe yield for the Congaree. There are safe yields at points along the Congaree. And if you think of it as we go up into the headwaters, those safe yields, just like the flows are less, and they accumulate as we go down into the main stem. And safe yield, as I said, the calculation is 20% of the mean annual daily flow. And if we take a period of record, and this graphic is from the South Fork of the Edisto, and we look at the flow at the Edisto, which is in the blue graphic, and then we have a calculated safe yield, you can see that there are times when the actual flow of the river is less than the calculated safe yield. And that's again why I'd like to say that safe yield really should be called legally available water for permitting and registrations, because it doesn't actually guarantee that the water is there. And then you can see the 20, 30, 40 average annual flow. Those are minimum in-stream flows as defined by the law. But again, only new permits are subject to that. So our grandfathered permits and registrations are not subject to having to meet those minimum in-stream flows, which again can cause a challenge in trying to manage the water resource. I did want to give a shout out to DNR, who's in the middle of doing the state water plan. So on the groundwater side, again, you can be involved as part of our local groundwater management planning. But if you really want to be involved in surface water planning, it's kind of the state water plan is where that is happening, as well as groundwater planning for that effort. But the state water plan is being updated from the 2004 state water plan. The method that DNR has taken to get to this is they're creating regional water plans or basin water plans. So each of the major water basins in the state of South Carolina is developing their own local plan, basin-wide plan, and then those plans will feed into the state water plan. In this process, there was a planning committee, and I know we've heard from some of the planning committee already today. It's called the PPAC that helped plan the framework, which is available if you want to view it online. And we're now in the process of the Edisto River Basin has set up their regional water or their basin planning council. Funding is an issue with this effort. So there's funding to do the Edisto basin, but currently there's not funding to get the other basins up and going at this point. But if you're interested in water planning statewide, or how you can be involved, with that effort, I encourage you to visit the DNR website and get more information on that. And I believe that's all I had.
All right, thanks, Alex. Quickly before I turn it over to Guillermo, just a reminder that as you guys have questions, make sure to go ahead and enter those in the Q&A box. And if there's things that you guys are interested in, go ahead and upvote those as well. All right, on to our third speaker, Guillermo Espinosa.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to speak at this panel. I'm just gonna pull up a short presentation. As Dr. Cuffer mentioned at the beginning of the talk, I work as a senior planner in Central Midlands Council of Governments. And we're a regional planning agency that pretty much serves as a forum for organizations in the Central Midlands region. And that includes Richland County, which is where most of the Concord National Park is located. My supervisor likes calling our agency like the United Nations. And it's a pretty good analogy. We kind of serve as this in-between neutral party between local government agencies, state agencies, the public, and nonprofit organizations, et cetera, to be able to discuss things neutrally. But I know this is a local, managing water locally talk, right? But since I work in a regional planning agency, I'm going to be zooming out a bit and focusing on the regional level, because when it comes to water quality, as we all know, particularly this audience, water is not a political entity. It doesn't quite follow jurisdictional boundaries, but it does flow through a political environment. So when you're treating with water, you have to treat it regionally. You have to think of it as a regional issue with regional solutions. And as we've seen throughout the talks today, if you attended some of them, it's also important to understand the history of what is already there. So we can potentially collaborate and not duplicate efforts and make sure everybody is included in the solution. So, all right. So I'm going to go over some of the water quality planning that we do in the region here at Central Midlands Council of Governments and with our member governments, and how these different geographic levels interact to address water quality. And some of the players are actually in this talk, like DHEC, who's the designated state agency responsible for water quality management, right? Like they set the rules, through federal and state regulations, they can provide funding to agencies such as ours, Central Midlands, or councils of governments in general, can serve as designated planning agencies to do water quality planning activities. As you see in this map, like not all council of governments serve as designated planning agencies when it comes to water quality, but Central Midlands is one of them. Other times, DHEC serves as the water quality management agency for areas that are not within the council of governments system. So we in the council of governments specifically work under the goals and regulations of what is the Section 208 of the Clean Water Act. And this section of the Clean Water Act provided criteria to design local water quality management plans, but within a regional context, pulling out a bit in that geographic level. So sticking to that regional geographic level and zooming a little bit more into the Central Midlands region, we coordinate with both DHEC and what are the wastewater management agencies that you see on the right-hand side of the slide that are actually responsible for implementing water quality management goals at the local level. And it's hard to count just looking at this map, right? But just in our 4-county region, we have about 40 service areas. And that's split between about 25 public or private management agencies. So that's ranging from millions of gallons a day, multi-jurisdictional regional wastewater treatment systems to localized treatment systems that are just for mobile home parks or communities that are detached from the regional sewer system at large. So when it comes to the 208 plan, I'll try not to wade too deep into the weeds here, but generally it was created with the goal of establishing regional policies that improve water quality and promote efficient management of wastewater collection systems. And when the Clean Water Act was first published, I wasn't alive at the time, right? But from what I read and all the education I got, whatnot, industrial waste was a major issue when the Clean Water Act was created, but the availability of sewer infrastructure was also a major contributor to water quality issues around the country. So sections 208 and section 201 of the Clean Water Act provided a framework for states to fund and also implement those regional wastewater treatment systems and treat the water quality issue as a regional problem. So the way the 208 section of the Clean Water Act works is that it establishes policies that try to consolidate wastewater collection systems and promote the most economically efficient solution to treat wastewater in a given region, with the general idea that a regional wastewater treatment system is more efficient. It's more cost effective than managing a localized system, which can just treat an individual community or a dwelling, for example, septic. And if a localized system is like the only option, like it's a necessary option because in some places it still is, then it's also important to account for what could be connecting to a more regional treatment system in the future. And as you see on the screen, these are some of the goals and policies that the 208 plan establishes to do just that, to try to efficiently treat wastewater systems. And the most, I guess, impressive and most visually impacting way of measuring the effectiveness of consolidating wastewater treatment systems through this section of the Clean Water Act comes through what you see on the screen, which is our consolidation map of wastewater treatment systems. And you know, at the end of the day, again, going back to why regional systems are more efficient, it's easier to control for something of that size than it is to control local systems that are not connected to the region as a whole. And because of that, of these 208 planning activities, since 1976, which was the creation of the first iteration of the plan, this has led to the consolidation of about 130 local wastewater treatment systems. And there's still more. I'm not going to get into detail as to each one, but it's a big decrease, right? So where are we now, right? Is it the Section 208 of the Clean Water Act is still in effect. So right now, Central Midlands Council of Governments as a designated planning agency when it comes to water quality management in the Central Midlands region continues to support DHEC when it comes to water quality planning. If there's a project in development that requires tying into a sewer collection system or needs to process wastewater somehow, chances are good we're going to be aware of it through our conformance review fees that we do to help DHEC out in determining if a project requires more technical information or something to actually be able to conform to the rules and regulations of Section 208 of the Clean Water Act. And these things don't really occur in a vacuum. We work with elected officials to inform them and discuss these issues. When it comes to regional issues related to the goals and policies of the 208 plan, our Council of Government board, which is made of elected officials and other public and private representation, they have a technical subcommittee just to discuss these issues, which is called the Environmental Planning and Advisory Committee. And they recommend potential changes to the 208 plan. They recommend amendments to, change things that, might not be working. And all that is discussed publicly. And eventually it reaches a public decision-making process through elected officials, through our Council of Government board. And even if you think of all these different agencies as separate, at the end of the day, despite working independently from one another, there's still providing a similar service that we can coordinate and discuss to address what is a regional problem. And you know, the EPAC, for example, serves as a forum to do just that. So this neutral forum and the technical support we provide to member governments in our region also allows us to pursue funding opportunities and address water quality issues in a more regional context. So as a current example in the right side of the screen, we're currently working with various local government agencies to develop a watershed-based plan to address bacterial contamination at the confluence of what is the Saluda, Broad, and Congaree rivers. And we're calling that the Three Rivers Watershed-Based Plan. And you know, there's people in this panel that are also participating in it, and you know, it's something that we're excited to be developing. And also, it's upstream from Congaree National Park, so it's something that we try to share with other players in the region, because they're also involved in what is the water quality of the region as a whole. So since this is a talk about like issues of water quality management locally, right? Where do we go from here? So, you know, maybe I'm biased because, you know, as a planner in a regional agency that's a neutral forum, I think, long story short, it's just a continuing conversation, right? Like we are not in the Council of Government in a regulatory capacity, right, to be able to tell people what they need to do, but we're in a technical support capacity to be able to support collaboration and communication. And with the region expected to surpass more than 1 million residents by 2050, dealing with what we think is the waste of the future might be a problem for the present. So on this slide, I listed a couple of issues that we see cropping up when it comes to regional problems, when it comes to water quality and as the population grows in particular. So importantly, just verse repeating coordination is important, in particular with areas that were originally too far to tie into what is a regional sewer system, be it that they're more like more localized treatment through septic, or a more localized sewer system that might be old and needs to be folded in, right? There's also instances of multiple players operating in an area. And what I mean with this is that sometimes the sewer utility treating an area might not be the same utility that's providing water to it. And it might not even be the same jurisdiction, right? So communication between those agencies might not be already established, or there might not be a current legal solution to solve that kind of problem. And at the moment, we're actually seeing some sanitary sewer overflow issues that have cropped up because of that same issue, and it's a continuing problem. Something else that we need to be able to solve these issues is just making available, if it doesn't exist, or standardizing geographic information, right? Sometimes all this information is in old maps, right? And it's not currently digitized. It's hard to determine what's currently there or not. Sometimes the institutional knowledge of our organization leaves. So having that data easily available to discuss and determine potential water quality issues or the distribution of customers and sewer systems could be a big deal when it comes to determining problem areas and solutions. And this has obvious implications when it comes to economic and community development, right? So, you know, sewer coming into a region is also a big economic driver, and you know that can have like cultural impacts on top of that. But just having sewer being available can be a big boon for an area. And beyond the economic impacts, there's also like the environmental science effects of, you know, climate change and adapting to potential more extreme natural hazards in the region, like increased precipitation, flooding, like we've seen in the more recent years, and probably expecting other years in the future. So with that becoming a problem, planning ahead might be more difficult, and even more difficult to plan for treating other types of waste, such as nutrients, like nitrates or phosphorus, that can have other kinds of impacts that might not be currently being dealt with. So a few closing thoughts. So there's no one-stop solution, right? And I think kind of like a chat out, I like coalitions such as the Congaree Biosphere Regional Advisory Council, because establishing the element of coordination and communication beyond the needs of a mandate of an individual agency is critical to create that buy-in, that excitement that we're seeing other people talk about during these presentations. Because, for example, the national park, the impacts of it, both as an economic driver and a community leader in a way, go beyond the park borders. So a holistic approach is really necessary to understand these water quality issues as they impact the region, and I'm understanding that they don't just fall within political boundaries, and that everyone needs to be able to communicate with one another to start finding a solution. You need to be able to integrate all these different stakeholders and experts to be able to discuss and communicate a potential solution to the problem, potentially a long-term solution. So, seeing how many people in these talks have been talking about the same thing, I think that's definitely hopeful for the future. So I'm going to close with that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Guillermo. And I'll also mention before we start with Garrett that if you're interested, I know Guillermo has uploaded some slides, so you'll find that either in the symposium documents or in the slide deck, depending on what format you're looking at. But that might be a resource if you guys are interested in what he was talking about. Go ahead and check that out as well. All right, then batting cleanup for us today in the session is Garrett Jobses from American Rivers.
Hello, thank you, John. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Can you all see that?
Yep, looks good.
Great. Yes, I'm Garrett Jobses. I'm with American Rivers. Before I get started, I want to thank John Grego for inviting me to make this presentation, and also everything else he and the other folks with Friends of Congaree Swamp have done to coordinate this, this symposium. And thank you, John Cuthbert, for helping me kind of figure out what I'm going to talk about, as far as giving me a good topic definition, and also the folks at Delaney that really helped me try to understand how WUVA and Zoom all interact, which is the first time I've used that. So thank you all very much for that. I'm with American Rivers. American Rivers is a national conservation organization. We've been around for about 50 years. We're located in our headquarters are in Washington, D.C. And we also work in 11 distinct geographies, which we define based on the river basins that we think are high priority for the nation. Those include the rivers of Southern Appalachia and the Carolinas. We've been present in the Southeast for about 20 years, and have had staff in South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia for most of that 20-year period. So our mission is to protect wild rivers, restore damaged rivers, and to conserve clean water for people and nature. We're probably best known for three major areas. One is wild and scenic rivers, which we heard Jeff Duncan talk about earlier today. That's why we were founded as an organization, was to promote wild and scenic river protection. We've been involved with more wild and scenic river creations than any other organization that's not a federal agency. We also do a lot of work on integrated water management, known for our work to kind of look at holistic solutions to wastewater, stormwater, and drinking water needs for communities. And then thirdly, what I'll be talking about today is we are known for our work on dams. We've been working on dams, either hydropower dams or dam removal, for more than 20 years. And that's the subject of my presentation today, is the dam challenges that are affecting Congaree National Park. So this is a map of the dams in South Carolina. So I think the first thing you will recognize is that—
Before you go on, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's not advancing right now. So we're still on your opening slide, and it's not in slide presentation mode.
Okay, that's odd. I'm seeing mine as slide presentation mode.
Maybe it's just me.
No, actually, sometimes if you're using a second screen, the Zoom doesn't recognize that you're using two screens. So you might have to close out of the second screen and open it up on your primary screen.
Okay, let me try sharing a different way then. Is that better?
Yes. Yep. It now looks like it's a PDF format or a different type of format.
Right. It's got a picture of folks by a river.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
correct.
Right. Okay. Good. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, when I went to share screen, I think it switched me around somehow. Anyway, but thank you for letting me know that. So again, the thing we really work on, again, one of the major things we work on are dams, and there you go. And so this is a map of South Carolina with dams. As I was saying, you know, dams are not an endangered species in South Carolina or basically anywhere in our country. We have over 2,400 dams that are regulated. This does not include thousands of smaller dams, things like farm ponds that are not regulated. The red dots on this map or blocks on this map represent hydropower dams that are regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission or the federal government. And then the yellow ones are non-federal dams that are regulated by the state of South Carolina through the Dam Safety Program. Yeah, so I guess, you know, overall, we've done a damn good job of damming up our rivers in South Carolina. And one of our goals is to find a way to better manage these dams. So why do we care about dams? Dams have a number of impacts. One is habitat fragmentation. Basically, when you look at an aquatic environment, a riverine environment, and you put a dam on the river, you're basically breaking the water body into two pieces, the river into two pieces. If you put multiple dams, you're creating a mosaic of fragmented parts of a whole system that just don't function as one anymore. So that's a big problem with dams. Also, the way dams are operated can alter river flows. This is especially true with larger dams, large hydroelectric power dams especially. Dams affect floodplains. The Congaree National Park, as I'm sure you've heard already today, is the floodplain of the Congaree River. So the way dams operate upstream of the Congaree National Park certainly affect the floodplain. And then also there are aquatic habitat impacts, community impacts associated with the changes in flow alterations, the habitat fragmentation, and those floodplain impacts. So to keep rivers healthy, we need to, and to keep the Congaree National Park healthy, we need to effectively manage our dams in the area. So the first, this is a map where I've circled a couple of hydropower projects that have a direct effect on the Congaree National Park. The upper one, that's a number of squares, is the Parr Fairfield hydroelectric project near Peak, South Carolina. It is operated by Dominion Energy, and people may know about Parr Reservoir or Lake Monticello. Those are the two reservoirs associated with this. We have very good news is that just this past year, just in the past few months, a new federal hydropower license was issued for these dams. And it will benefit 23 miles of the Broad River and the Congaree River also, since the Broad River is the major tributary to the Congaree. Benefits include better flow protection, clean water, more oxygen being required from the dam releases, circumstances for spawning fish, conditions for spawning fish, and also some periods of time where they're going to run in what's called a run-of-river mode, basically where they're just passing the water through naturally rather than altering it due to the hydroelectric generation that they do. The lower of these two circled areas is the Saluda Dam, or what people here locally call the Lake Murray Dam. It is also a hydroelectric project operated by Dominion Energy, and is much bigger in relation to the amount of water it stores and how it can alter flows than the Parr Dam is. Unlike the Parr Dam, also, it has not received a new federal operating license. The license for the Lake Murray Dam expired more than 10 years ago. So does want to talk a little bit more about the Saluda Dam. It affects about 60 miles of the Congaree and Saluda rivers. It changes water flows that are needed for recreation and for aquatic life, but also it alters flooding patterns. This is especially important for the Congaree National Park. The way that Lake Murray draws down during the winter time of the year, stores water during the spring time of the year, and then empties that water again in the fall, winter, can have some profound effects on the flooding patterns in Congaree National Park. Storing that water in the spring means lesser flows than would be naturally occurring during the high flow period, and releasing more water in the late summer or fall is more water than would normally occur in that period. The good thing is the new license agreement, which again has been put in place about 10 years ago, does address these, and it does have changes in the way the Lake Murray Dam will operate to provide better downstream flows to reduce the impacts of these out of season flooding patterns, and also will create some great recreation opportunities. So we're still waiting for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to issue this new license. I'm not exactly sure why the license is being held up this long. Dominion Energy is looking into this, and I believe there will be some meetings with some of the relicensing stakeholders soon to talk about how we can get past these delays that have been going on for way, way too long. The second kind of group of dams I want to talk about are these smaller dams. There are dozens of small dams that surround Congaree National Park. And just like large dams, small dams have similar impacts just on a smaller scale, but combined they can have a tremendous effect on the health of a watershed. Each of these dams blocks natural processes like sediment transport, allowing fish migration, and other aquatic wildlife to inhabit the natural range. And can also be some profound safety hazards for people who want to recreate on these rivers. So one of American River's flagship programs is to work on dam removals. These are voluntary dam removals where we work collaboratively with dam owners to find ways to resolve some of the problems they have, which could be problems as far as how much money it costs to repair or maintain their dams, or concerns they may have about liability. And if they are interested in getting their dams removed, we work with them to achieve that and provide technical guidance and potentially funding to help with that. Let me get to the next slide first before I get too much farther down. So when it comes to removing dams, again, the kind of inverse is happens when you remove these dams. You reconnect the upstream, downstream, and floodplain habitats. You can restore the aquatic communities and fish passage. Sediment transport is really important and sometimes overlooked, but sediment naturally flows through our rivers and streams. And when you put a dam there, it blocks that. That actually ends up causing more erosion downstream. So you get more banks that are eroded away, bank sloughing and other impacts, and also can raise water temperatures during the summer, lower water temperatures during the winter, and cause dissolved oxygen issues, lack of oxygen in the water. So one of the main reasons that dams get removed is because the dam owners don't want them anymore. Dam removal is often less expensive than doing repairs and maintenance, and also it gets rid of the liability that the dam owner would be facing due to things like failed dams that we have experienced here in South Carolina recently. So one of the reasons we get involved with dam removal is to try to promote this practice and to try to normalize dam removal as a regular stream restoration tool. In 2019, we collaborated with the Congaree Riverkeeper, the Department of Natural Resources, the town of Casey, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to remove a small dam on Congaree Creek. It was owned by the town of Casey. They built it 50 years ago as an emergency water supply reservoir or impoundment that was basically forgotten about. And so when the city was contacted by about the removal of this dam, they first didn't even really know they owned it. And then when they found out they did, they said they would gladly have it removed. So this was achieved in May of 2019 and opened up 16 miles of Congaree Creek upstream of this dam, and also allows migration of fish now past the Congaree Heritage Preserve through the area where this dam had occurred, and then back down into the Congaree River and down ultimately to around where the Congaree National Park is. Since the time of this dam removal, American Rivers has helped form the South Carolina Aquatic Connectivity Team. That is a collaborative effort among state and federal agencies, including the Department of Natural Resources, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Forest Service, the Corps of Engineers, and DHEC, especially the dam safety program that is housed within DHEC. And I actually want to give a big shout out to our dam safety program in the state. They have been excellent partners and are really interested in trying to get rid of dams that are causing hazards to the public. As I've said before, we as a state have experienced a lot of dam failures, and we all recognize the impacts that can occur from failing dams such as those we had on Gills Creek, which is in the Congaree watershed. And also we have a nonprofit organizations involved. We have Riverkeepers, the Congaree Riverkeeper, Edison Riverkeeper, and also land trusts and other conservation groups that are involved with this. So our real goal is to create a community of practice for dam removal and provide more funding to be able to take out dams that are impacting the rivers in South Carolina, but also those that affect Congaree National Park. So yeah, I think that really, the dam challenges affecting Congaree National Park is that we have a lot of dams, and that, in order to maintain and improve the natural health and functions of the Congaree National Park, we have to reduce the impacts these dams are having on the Congaree River and the other streams in this watershed, and have a way of better securing the future of this wonderful national park that we are also fortunate to have. So that is my presentation, John.
Thanks, Garrett. And if you can go ahead and stop sharing, which you just did. We have a number of questions. So first of all, let me thank the speakers. That was great. And it certainly provided a range of different perspectives on managing water at not only just the scale of individual reaches or cities, but how that also sort of scales out to looking at regions and even statewide with some of the stuff that Alex was talking about. If you have questions, go ahead and keep filling them in, but I'll start with the ones that we do have. And again, I'll be doing these sort of in the order of votes. So the first of these is basically for Synethia, which is the county's water quality monitoring data available online?
Currently, no, it's not up on our website. We do quarterly monitoring reports, and I just haven't really put them up on the website, but they are public information. So I believe my contact information is available if people ever want to know them, but that is a pretty good idea. And I'll go back and talk to our monitoring folks and our IT folks about putting that up so people can read them.
Fantastic, thank you. So number two is for Alex. Can you talk about what are the major permit holders and outtakes in Richland County? And this actually has a couple different parts of it. So if you want to do them one at a time, or I can give you all three to start, but I think if I do that, you might need to then sort of look back. So can you first of all then just say, what are the major permit holders and outtakes in Richland County?
It's a great question, and I don't know off the top of my head. We certainly have a number of of industrial and water supply intakes in Richland County and outfalls in Richland County, but we have to go back and look and see which were the largest.
Okay, thanks. These are all coming, by the way, from Kaylin Berry, so thank you, Kaylin. Part 2 of her question then was, the histograms that you showed for wet and dry years were interesting. Do you have similar data showing the changes in legally available water over time, and or graphic representations of any threats to groundwater and surface water supplies over time?
Yeah, so that's kind of a two-part question. The safe yield is calculated on the period of record. So the safe yield is actually, if I calculate it today and then calculate it again 10 years from now, the number is likely to be different somewhat. So that's a good question. A lot of how the safe yield is calculated is dependent on having a long period of record in USGS stream gauges, which is also actually another thing that South Carolina has a shortage of. We don't have the same number of stream gauges that kind of North Carolina and Georgia do. We have a much smaller number of stream gauges, so that limits the amount of data we have. But that number, for the major river basins, we have stream gauges that have long periods of record, so that number doesn't really change over time. On the groundwater side, yeah, we have a lot of information as far as maps and graphics that show changes in water level over time. DNR does some potentiometric mapping efforts to map water levels in the aquifer, so we can look at how those change over time. And there's a groundwater monitoring network that you can look at that information as well to see where the stress areas are. We also have lots of reports on the DHEC website from water use, if you're interested in who's using water and where. We have all that up on the website that you can get to and look at.
Okay, and then final of Kaylin's 3 questions were, overall, how would you characterize the state of our water resources?
Yeah, I tell people South Carolina's it's lucky because we're a wet state, right? Like we have lots of water in South Carolina. We're not the desert. The problem we have in South Carolina is making sure that the water is where it needs to be when it needs to be there. So we have kind of little pockets that have stress points, but overall, I would say South Carolina is in good shape with its water resources. We just need to figure out how to deal with these kind of localized pockets where maybe there's a high demand in times where there's maybe the lower supply.
Okay, thank you. So we've actually got 2 here that'll be Garrett's. I'll sort of couple these together, and I'll start with the smaller scale one first, which is there's a question about who first contacted Casey about the Forgotten Dam and then got the ball rolling on the dam removal project.
Well, we actually, the first one to get us aware of this was the state dam safety program. American Rivers actually gave a training to the dam safety program about dam removals, and they let us know that the property owner upstream of this dam was concerned about the flooding effects it was having. We then started working with our partners, and I believe it was the Congaree Riverkeeper that was the first one to contact the city of Casey about this. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the Congaree Riverkeeper that was the first one to actually approach them about the removal.
Okay, and then the sort of bigger scale, and this was one that I was interested in because I know a little bit about this, but really not that much. Can you talk about other dam removal projects or long range planning about other things, either in the area or within the state of South Carolina?
I absolutely can. So we, yeah, really kind of going back a little bit, dam removal as a kind of practice really started as a serious initiative in probably 1999 when the Edwards Dam near Augusta, Maine was taken out. And it really kind of launched a new approach and definitely got American River started in dam removals. So there have been hundreds of dams removed around the country since that time. I've got whole presentations on that, but in American Rivers, at least, we started our dam removal program in the Carolinas, first in North Carolina. And we did that in 2010 is when we started that. We've had, I believe it's 21 dams removed in North Carolina since that time. We then started our program in Tennessee. I think that was in 2014. We've seen about a half dozen dams come out of Tennessee since that time. And now just recently it started our work in South Carolina. We had 2 dams removed in 2019. One was in Greenville County on a trout stream. And the other was this Congaree Creek Dam here. And then we had 2 come out in 2020. Both of those were in Oconee County. One was the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Forest Service property. And they took out an old dam that was failing. And then the second one was also in Oconee County, but I'm forgetting exactly which one that was. But those are the dam removals we've had this year. And then we had a third one actually that was a breach of a dam. It was not really a full removal, but this is one that the dam safety program was involved with. That is, I believe, in Spartanburg County, if I'm right. And that was called an engineered breach, where basically it didn't take out the whole dam, but it took out the part of the dam that was in the stream itself, and then kind of tapered back some of the remaining dam fill that was there. So it does open the creek up there, but it doesn't fully remove the dam that's there. So yeah, we have a lot of other projects kind of in the works, or some other projects that are in the work right now, and I think we're going to continue with this South Carolina Aquatic Connectivity Team, continue to find more projects, get more people trained to do dam removals, and also help find new funding for dam removals.
And just while I have you on here, this came up, I think, in the middle of, or maybe just before the previous question. Have there been any obvious beneficial effects from the Congaree Creek Dam removal project? And conversely, are there any concerns about the condition of the sediment behind the dam or what its impacts might be?
Let me ask the second one first. There were some concerns about sediment at the Congaree Creek Dam. Those of you who've been around for a while may remember, I believe it was in the late 1990s, there was a spill of tributyl tin in Red Bank Creek, which is a tributary of Congaree Creek. And so there was concern where there may be some of these latent sediment toxins still there from that spill that happened before. We worked and did a tier 1 sediment analysis there. And there also had been a record of decision that those contaminated sediments were no longer there. So we got the go-ahead to take the dam out without having to worry about contaminants. As far as the benefits go, certainly one benefit is now that this creek is now open to, boating recreation. Before that dam created a blockage to it, didn't allow people to paddle upstream beyond it from the recreation put in, which is just right below that. And also, as you may have seen from those photos, it created what's called a roller. Basically, as the water was spilling over that dam, it was creating a turbulent situation. Those rollers are often hazardous because people that are swimming or potentially boating get trapped in them, and the forces of the water keep them there. And we have a number of drownings, unfortunately, that occur every year below dams because of that. So it also removed that safety hazard. We do fully expect that the species that are in the stream, which are include blueback herring, which is a migratory fish that migrates from the ocean into fresh waters and likes to spawn in these smaller streams, that those fish have now access to that 16 miles of stream upstream of where the dam was that they didn't previously have. But I don't know of any studies that have actually documented that. There's just no reason to think they wouldn't swim past the old location of that dam.
Fantastic. So this is a more general one, and I'm actually going to let Guillermo answer first because I feel bad that we've been giving everybody else some good talking time here, and it's probably one that's maybe particularly relevant to his role with the Central Midlands COG. What do you see as the greatest impediment to effective local management of our waterways? Is it money, politics, other resources, will, people, or something else?
I appreciate throwing me in the middle there, but yeah, I do think I have some answers. Well, personally, right, not from Central Midlands policy standpoint, and the reason I keep bringing up coordination and collaboration and my short talk is because I think when it comes to some of the water quality issues, economics starts becoming a sticky point when talking about who's going to benefit and how we're going to solve issues. And just being willing to come to the table and, you know, talk about that can be a little bit fraught. So I think that's a big first step, like being willing to discuss these issues that have some potentially significant economic impacts. If you have like a water utility you're running, if you have a sewer utility that you need to upgrade, like there's some economic resources, but when there's not, and you're facing a population that might be decreasing, or you're kind of locked in your service area and you don't have anywhere to expand, like where do you go from there, right? You're talking about the money that you're not getting back. So I think being willing to try to find the efficient solutions that could benefit that economic problem you're facing, and being able to talk about it openly is a great first step. And also educating the general public on watershed processes and how water works in a system, not just, you know, in the little place that you see it and it gets absorbed into the ground. Like, you know, like Alexander was saying, it will just go down to the ground, and that's where the groundwater you draw is going to be. And so educating the public and also being able to have these coalitions to discuss issues, I think is very important.
Others?
I'll kind of agree with Guillermo a little bit. And I'll also say funding. I get teased a lot in public works that we're the rich division, but we're really not. I mean, our budget is about $3.4 million. And I would love to personally have $3.4 million. But when you're thinking about all of the miles of county drainage infrastructure, it doesn't go very far with maintaining our infrastructure and also meeting the requirements of the program. And then just, as Guillermo said, the coalitions. So many times I go out and talk to a citizen, or they call, and it's a DOT situation, or it's something within a municipality. And I know they feel like we're passing the buck, but just like I can't go into my neighbor's house and tell them what to do in their house, I can't go to DOT or City of Columbia and tell them what to do in their jurisdiction. And so it's having those coalitions and working together. I can't go on the concrete park and tell you guys what to do. That's federal land. So it's being able to work together and knowing who to call to make these partnerships happen to try to address the citizen concern when it's not just a Richland County backyard kind of situation.
Yeah, I'll add funding is always a challenge. As I mentioned, the state water plan, which is a really important effort statewide, is struggling with funding at the moment. So, you know, just the lack of a funding mechanism for water planning in a bigger sense, I think is a real hindrance to getting things done.
And if I can add one more thing, I agree with everything the others have said. But one thing that Alex pointed out in his presentation was our surface water withdrawal law. And it sets out some very unrealistic thresholds for how much water can be withdrawn. Basically, it allows more water to be withdrawn than it is even there half the time for a lot of streams in the state. And it also, while municipal water withdrawals and industrial water withdrawals are required to leave some water in the stream, agricultural water withdrawals are exempt from that. They can continue to withdraw their water until there's no water without having to ever stop. So we have a real serious flaw with our state surface water law that will certainly, you know, as we continue to develop, continue to put in more water withdrawals, it's going to continue to have bigger impacts. This has been a big issue on the Edisto River. As water demand increases, it will probably find its way to other rivers too in our state. So changing this now 10-year-old law to make it more realistic and agree with science is really important.
I just want to clarify one thing that Garrett said. Water supply and industrial users, new permits are subject to minimum in-stream flow. but all grandfathered permits are not subject to that minimum mainstream flow. And that's the vast majority of permits in the state.
Right. Thanks, Alex.
All right, thanks. So
I wanted to ask something quick, if you don't mind. I mentioned in my quick presentation something about data availability, and I think that's also another big problem when it comes to at least managing wastewater treatment systems and sharing information, because just being able to communicate on the same page, might not be as easy as you think when you come in with all these data and analyses, and then another successful utility system is not speaking the same language, right? So just being able to communicate about the same problems in the same way, I think is also important.
good. So can I, and I'll insert one quick follow-up to that because I think it's relevant to what we're talking about. John had just inserted a comment, and this would be directed to you, Alex. So he notes that he was concerned about the safe flow graph for the Edisto. It didn't look very conservative. And can you just sort of comment on that as far as this bigger discussion that we're having?
Yeah, again, the graphic, because I think he's talking about is the safe yield line that I presented, and that's a recognized issue with the way the law is currently written. Is that again, it shouldn't be called safe yield for one. It should be called legally available water to start with, and then is it protective if that water is not there, up to large portions of the year for some streams. And that's a debate that certainly has happened a lot. We had a safe yield work group last year to try to determine if there was a better way to calculate that in the regulation. That we put a report about that meeting group up on our website, which is also available. But the takeaway from that was there are kind of some maybe larger issues in the law itself that need to be addressed as well, from grandfathering to registrations versus permits and different categories of users. So no change in the safe yield calculation actually came out of that. But again, we can only, as DHEC, we're a creature of regulation and statute. So we're only allowed to do what's in the regulation and statute, and the way the law and the reg are currently structured, that safe yield, that's how that safe yield is calculated.
Thanks. We have another dam removal question for Garrett, and it comes from Kaylan, and I think probably a number of us with deep ties to Congaree National Park are interested in this as well. You talked a little bit about sort of the planning for dam removals as we look forward. Can you talk about the next one that's likely to impact Congaree and provide any thoughts related to that?
Well, at this time, I don't know of any dams that are going to be coming out in the area around the national park. I do want to talk about an opportunity that we have. I mentioned the PAR hydroelectric project, and that license had just been issued. One thing that's part of that license is that Dominion Energy has agreed to create an environmental fund to offset the impacts of their ongoing operations. A lot of that is related to how they fluctuate the PAR reservoir, and excuse me. So those funds are going to become available starting at the end of this year, and can pay for dam removals and other stream restoration, habitat protection initiatives in the Broad River, Congaree River, and part of the Saluda River watershed. So it's going to be a new funding source. The very first and most important thing that you have to have for a successful dam removal project is for the owner, again, for a voluntary dam removal project, is for the owner to say, yes, we want to have this dam removed. And the second most important thing to do is to get that funding together to start the process. So this new fund that Dominion Energy will be creating is going to be a really good opportunity for us to get that funding once we do find a project that the owner wants to have taken out.
Fantastic. So we have just a few minutes left, and this will be another general question that you guys can all chime in on. And it really stems from one of the main reasons why, or one of the main things that we're trying to address with this symposium, right? So a lot of what we've talked about in the session, I don't want to say it's been removed from the waterways exhibit, but I want to tie it back into that and into some of the sessions that we've had a little bit earlier today, you know, connecting people into their watershed, some of the things, for instance, that the people in the previous session had talked about. And the question is this: what is one thing that you think people viewing these presentations today can do to help address or solve the challenges or issues that have been raised in our session? You know, so it's sort of, it's meant to be optimistic, right? I've sort of asked you guys to be focused on challenges or difficulties, but this is sort of the forward thinking part of it and how we can sort of connect the park or the larger Congaree biosphere to some positive things that people can take away from this.
I can talk about one very big positive, and that's the amount of interest there is in the Congaree National Park and the watershed that's around it. I mean, we have great participation here. We have a number of different organizations and agencies that are involved in trying to do a better job of protecting and making sure that the watershed and the park itself stay healthy. So I think that's a very positive thing. We really do have good momentum in this, and I've got some gray hair here, so I have been around for a while, and I will say the societal expectation of how we manage our water bodies and lands like the Congaree National Park, I think are at a much higher level than they were 30 years ago. So I think that's a very, very good thing, and I'm happy to see that momentum.
I'd like to echo that, Garrett. Like when I first started with DHEC, we would go give presentations on water, and nobody would be there. Like it would be me and maybe a guy from the USGS presenting to each other. And there's been a real interest statewide about water resources. And I think that's kind of a positive thing is people, I think, are becoming aware that if they get involved in the process, they can have a much larger say in the outcome. And I think we're starting to see that with the state water plan, where it's kind of intended to be locally driven, and there's a lot more diverse voices than what normally has been in these kinds of meetings and situations. And so I take that as a real positive.
I'll jump in and say I agree that the interest here is awesome. And people should continue to spread the word and advocate for what they believe in. But a lot of times I'm seeing the exact same people at every single meeting, and it's the same people who are just talking to each other. This year we did a lot of virtual roundtable discussions with citizens, and they don't know about the resources. Like, yeah, everyone here may go to the park or may care about their creek, but then if you just talk to your neighbors or the people in my neighborhood, they may not know as much. So I think we have to start thinking outside of just our groups and that we belong to. If we really want to preserve and protect water resources and we want council members or state representatives to advocate for that, then we need a broader group of people who are aware of our water resources and who are also advocating for them. So that means you have to get out of your comfort zone. It's not just talking to the same people who come to your water meeting every week. It's actually going out into the community and letting people know about what you do, which is why we had those virtual roundtables, so we could figure out what people know, what they want, so we can try to bring information to them that's relevant and useful. And that's uncomfortable for a lot of people who always talk to the same folks who hear the same thing and they're like, yeah, save the waters. Well, talk to that person who they don't go outside. You got to also convince those people why it's important to come outside, or they want to go outside and they don't even know where to go. They don't know how to start. Talk to those people as well. And that's one of the things that I really wish people advocate more.
I gotta say 1,000% what Anita said. I don't know, maybe to add to it, like right, a lot of, or most people that came to this symposium, we're pushing to the choir, but we also work in different fields sometimes, and everybody needs water that I know of on this planet. So, you know, there's utility staff, there's scientists, there's community developers, there's businesses, there's the schools that they talk about the water cycle. Like there's many ways that you can educate people, but you know, not to put that burden on every single person that's attending this talk, but maybe you can just start with the people around you, right? Like everybody needs water. Do you know where your water is going to when you know, flush it down the toilet or down the drain? Do you know what happens to the water when you just spray it on your lawn? Like all those things are questions that may be simple for people to deal with it day to day, but a lot of people take it for granted. And I think generating that excitement that I heard in other talks about owning what's a local resource, which is something that you'll use day to day, and maybe you're not aware of it, I think it's very important.
And I think that's great. You know, in the previous session, it was certainly something that Bill Stangler talked a lot about, is as well as other folks in that session, is how do you really connect people to the rivers? And, you know, Bill talked about whether it's experiential things when you're out there and when you're doing things. And yeah, I think that's the one thing that I'll sort of wrap up with, and I'll toss this back to you guys then to see if you have any thoughts on it, is beyond us talking about folks or talking to folks about rivers and our waterways and their significance and all the things we've had in these different sessions, is trying to come up with ways to get people to engage. You know, how do we get them out there on the rivers? How do we get them, more than us as just sort of proselytizing, I guess, about it, is thinking about ways to sort of actively do that, whether that's going to be through K through 12 education or things that we do here at USC. So I don't know if you guys have any final thoughts about, you know, what we would encourage our neighbors to do, or what we would say to that person who we really want to feel a closer tie to our rivers with. What would you tell them, or what would be some ways that we can do that?
I got something, because I feel like I do this in my day-to-day sometimes, and I'm a big cook. I like baking. You need water for all those things, right? And I feel trying to relate the issue of, you know, something everybody uses to what they are experiencing in their day-to-day, you know, trying to be empathetic to their issues, which is a skill, you know, but it's important to try to relate it to what they deal with, right? Like it sucks to be going through a drought and not having water, and where does that water come from? Our local water resources, and just starting that idea of integrating this concept that really binds us all into everything, you know, like it's not only about water quality, it's about like conservation, it's about community development, it's about politics sometimes, and it's about money. So if you relate it to the person you're talking to, you know, I think they can quickly relate that this is an important resource.
And I say, don't just talk about the river. I live in Northeast Richland County, and we did fireworks for what was this? What just happened? New Year's, and my kids, you know, swept the road the next day, and because they care about even as though it's a detention pond, they care about the frogs and the deer and whatnot that comes to the detention ponds, and so that's a learning opportunity for my kids. That's a learning opportunity when I talk to my nephews or my cousins or my neighbors. There's creeks that go right next to your house or right in your neighborhood. That pond in your neighborhood may discharge to that. You can also think about making those simple connections just day to day, and not just, because some people are never going to canoe on that river, but you can make them care about their neighborhood and their backyard and why they should keep that clean.
I'll be the voice for people getting out and canoeing on the river. So I think Bill talked about this in the last session. If you get people out on the river, they tend to care a lot more about it. I'm an avid kayaker, and you know, I know that you know, I'm very attuned to if there's a sewer discharge in the lower Saluda, because I want to enjoy the river. And you know, I think once you get people out there, either on the river or by the river, you know, with greenways or just access to the river, they really do kind of can get a sense of, you know, that, hey, this is a part of our community, and we need protect it.
Thanks. And that'll be, I think, a great transition into the final panel discussion that we'll have as part of the symposium coming up in a few minutes. And that's going to be Spurred to Action, where we'll have representatives from a range of different organizations who are active in this area, everything from the Sierra Club to the Lower Richland Community Advisory Committee, Audubon, Congaree Land Trust, people from the park, people from the Congaree Biosphere Region, Gills Creek Watershed. And those are a lot of the kinds of organizations that are really, really active in the types of things that we're talking about. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. I want to thank our speakers. You guys did a great job. It was fascinating. I want to thank those of you guys who tuned in for this. I know when we were sitting here planning this and we're thinking Friday afternoon, who's going to get that coveted mid to late afternoon on a Friday slot. So I appreciate those of you guys that have hung with us during this. And I would encourage you, if you can, we've got a quick break coming up, but come back for that moderated panel discussion. There's going to be a lot of interesting things that will come up from that. So with that, thank you all. I hope you have a good weekend and enjoy the rest of the symposium.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good afternoon.